Good morning, everybody. Back from my wild man adventures with my son. Things didn't go so well, and I learned a lot just in the province of Alberta, even in the north, about crown land leases for agriculture. And it got me digging hard. And with that, and I come back to civilization, updates in the news, lots of updates in the news. Canada, India are like this. We're going to get into all of that. As I had the great fortune of meeting Khalistan independence right here in Alberta. They marched, those who remember, I met with them at the legislature when I returned from Ontario. I met them April 1st. They had a march at the legislature and I had a chance to talk to Harjeep, the professor in Calgary. He's Alberta's activist, while BC's activist Harjeep Najjar was assassinated. He was assassinated, and they've investigated, and it turns out Canada's saying through CSIS and their international connections that it was India's Modi who had foreign nationals come into Canada and assassinate him. And what we have to do is look at why that happened, how it happened, and here's the background on that. So in June of last year, we saw Najjar organize a float with others in Brampton, Ontario. And in that float, it takes the former Prime Minister in 1984, a female Prime Minister, whom had conflicts with the Sikhs on independence. Many died. There was an armed coup and many were killed. Many were killed. Was it right or wrong? That's for the nation of India. But folks, and I did Alberta independence. I've met that group. That float in Brandon, Ontario, that was June 8th of 2022, and then subsequently it was just within 10 days that Singh was assassinated. Folks, he made a float depicting a Sikh executing the Prime Minister in 1984, whom was assassinated. Now, people can say freedom of speech. They can say Trudeau's protecting the rights of the Sikhs to display that float that's in bad taste. Do you know I have all of UK's released documents in relation to 1984, UK and India? I think everybody can appreciate that UK, just like Hong Kong, had a tremendous relationship with India, an oppressive relationship with India. And yes, after World War II, India was the first country that King George had to let go. And if you haven't read the Opium Wars 1 and 2, you should, because India was a staging ground for the resources harvested for all the world's opium. It was forced on China and Hong Kong. To this day, China and India have all kinds of battles over areas. Pakistan as well too is in there, and this is the center of Sikh independence is in Pakistan. It's Khalistan, and they want the nation of Khalistan in Pakistan that was made by the United Nations post World War II. So Margaret Thatcher in 1984, all of her documents are released. Post this video, I'm going to release everything Margaret Thatcher said about everything that occurred and what the government of the UK did at the time. They did not support that assassination. They felt it was in bad taste, and in fact, all Khalistan independence inside the United Kingdom of 1984, she wanted to prosecute the lead instigator in that execution. She was deadly against. Now, I'm not about what's right or wrong, but folks, Folks, India's gone a direction. India's gone a direction. And that's for India to decide, nobody else. Especially crown colonials who had the thumb of oppression on those people. And again, if you ever want to look up India's independence from UK and King George VI, go do it. So this summer, when Brampton, Ontario's float was made and sent, and literally a week before, and I think earlier I said 2022, I meant 2023, everybody. They sent that float. It has a Sikh staged on the float. They got the Prime Minister getting executed. That was the float. Now, Canadians, I think you can appreciate when we talk about freedom of expression, the rights of Canadians to do such things, there's a huge contradiction, because I know for a fact there was a float in Sundre, Alberta, depicting Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on the float, and Jagmeet Singh rioting right behind him, basically insinuating that those two are working together and they're too close together. Maybe a homosexual reference there. Now, Sikhs came out in motorbikes. They did a big activism against that rude display that everybody highlighted in the media and shunned Sundre, Alberta. But not one word was said about the float depicting the execution of the Prime Minister of India in 1984 that ran in the same summer, that led to India quite possibly, sending assassins to BC to execute the leader of the Khalistan independence, whom organized that float. That's the truth. Right or wrong, I'm not here to tell people right or wrong. All I know is a lot of folks have been prosecuted for their displays, including one with a bullseye, the sights of a rifle scope, on some of our politicians. That was ruled almost as if terrorism, and people were charged for said crimes, according to the same Canadian government. But I guess that float, that we can look at Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of the time in 1984, and how bad she said that was, and how dangerous that was for UK citizens in India, or Indian citizens in UK who migrated and became subjects of UK. Just like how dangerous it would be. So, folks, Justin Trudeau knew that float. CSIS knew. You're telling me that they didn't know, they didn't have access to Margaret Thatcher's released documents in relation to India and the Khalistan movement, and in fact, the Khalistan separatists who shot and killed the Prime Minister of India in 1984, that float wouldn't enrage a nation. Margaret Thatcher said don't do it in 1984, and in fact, UK should have prosecuted the Khalistan independence leader who orchestrated and helped bring that to light. She said they should be prosecuted for the welfare of citizens in UK that are subjects now of the time, and abroad and in India. It wasn't safe for them. We shouldn't step on their sovereignty. Those are Margaret Thatcher's words, released, declassified. Now you're telling me that Trudeau didn't know that official opposition leader, and for people who don't know, official opposition leader, Conservatives, didn't know? They knew. They're well informed, more well informed than I am. But they keep from all of you, the Canadian subjects, the truth. They knew how dangerous this was and how far this could escalate. Which brings me to the question, why is Canada constantly, liberal or conservative, constantly at India's throat, constantly at Russia's throat, constantly at China's throat? Of all instigators, Canada's entire parliament and all legislatures are always at the throat of these three nations. I'm going to ask you all a serious question as things are getting really dangerous globally. Do you believe that USA can take China and Russia in a two-front war? More than that, do you believe that India, China, and Russia united with all of Russia's war machines and access to massive world destructive powers and that much manpower between China and India, do you all believe in your minds, I've got to ask this question, that USA at its 320 million people, and I don't care how much of an army you organize, do you think USA could take a three-front war against China, Russia, and India? Do you think that's conceivably possible? And do you think at that point, when the Commonwealth is torn apart, where India says, screw the Commonwealth and screw the rest of the West, do you think at that point USA, with the remnants and remains of the Commonwealth, are able to take on those three countries and have a victory? I can clearly tell you, without being a military expert, but looking at military experts around the world, no way in hell. But yet, this is where Canada continues to go. Of all countries, it's always Trudeau, supported by the official opposition, both aisles, NDP and Conservative. So I've never seen any of them say anything other than the status quo. In these minds of what I call lunatics who have a grandiose sense of self-worth, that's the first class. They think somehow in their divine brains, and they always think they're much bigger than they truly are. They think that they control the world, that don't worry, we'll force our will upon everybody and everyone will capitulate. Well, I'm sorry, they won't. And if anything about Modi shows the truth, that would be that he does not respect our sovereignty, and he doesn't have to. India is soon to be the world's most populous country. They're soon to take over China. 1.1 billion people. That's a massive force, and India could clearly wipe Canada right off the map tomorrow in a war. Now everybody says, well, USA will protect us. USA versus Russia, China, India, USA will protect us. UK, 66 million will protect us. I don't think so. UK is barely a third bigger than Canada in population. Not going to happen. You can say, oh, well, don't worry, we'll go throughout Europe and the Commonwealth. We'll get it all together. I don't think so. I don't think so. And all former colonial assets will clearly go the way of India. They'll follow India right to Russia and China. And that will be the divided world. It will be the colonials and USA, meaning in large part the white world, with largely white subjects, slaves, versus the rest of the world. And I don't care who says what. No analyst, no real military analyst would come forward and say that's a recipe for success for USA, UK, and Europe. There's no success there. I'm sorry. And anyone minimizing Russia's ability to destroy the world many times over is sadly mistaken. If you haven't seen the interview, the NBC interview with Donald Trump, that they did in fact checking. You know what? One of the fact checks they don't even mention, and this is another that elevated first class blinders on, where they try to blind all of us, the lowly Joe Janes, is that they never once fact checked or tried to myth bust Donald Trump's claim that Russia was pound for pound equivalent to USA. Where was their fact checking on that when it came to nuclear firepower and USA's ability to stop them? 45,000 megatons. That's Russia's capability. USA is at 32,000 megatons. Now, you can say, well, with UK, France, it starts to get equatable. Yeah, well, what about India? What about China? China and UK are equivalent in nuclear firepower. This is the problem with the world. It's a grand sense of grandiose first class. Oh, they don't care. They'll all get up and run away to Australia, the least likely area to be affected by world nuclear holocaust. But like I said, with winds and trajectories and how rains work, Australia would soon fall too. So I don't like that Canada seems to be constantly the dirty shirt with Russia, with China, now with India. We're always there poking the bear, sticking it to the bear every time. And the odds are continually growing against us. The colored world versus this white elite world. And when I say that, I don't mean the little Joe Janes, especially third class and most of the second class. It doesn't include you. This is an elite first class with a hand-chosen, hand-picked set of second class who support them, who the first class enrich. And they do that. And this is, I think, what people don't look at. Canada seems to be in there like a dirty shirt throughout all the parliaments, all the legislatures. Now, I want to hit the second part of this video. My hunting weekend up in 522 Peace River Wildlife Park, Provincial Park, and the surrounding accesses, it's on Crown land, but they're leased Crown land, so those agricultural leaseholders hold access to getting into the park, so they can greatly restrict you, and counties can impose all kinds of new bylaws and rules to hurt all kinds of people, hunters, enthusiasts of every kind of walk. And a lot of Canadians have never experienced that, have never even bothered to check out Crown lands. Now, the rules of Crown lands, you have upwards of anywhere from 2 weeks to 21 days in Canada to go enjoy Crown lands anytime you want. But I want to do this video on Crown lands in relation to sharecropping. Now, we're going to get into that. And communism. Now, folks, communism first arrived on the scene World War I, 1917. You would all be taught in school and learn. I think every Canadian First people, you'd be taught and learned about warnings about the USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republic, and the dangers of communism. Ooh, and you'd remember Germany post-World War II as they were dismembered by the Allies, and USA and Russia divided them as a republic in half. The Berlin Wall. They made a wall and divided them in half. Well, when you go around Canada, see the Canadian government, and we're looking at communism was born in 1919. Sharecropping was the beginning of communism. Sharecropping was not slavery. And if you read all the literature, they say sharecropping was born post the American Revolution, 1866. That's where sharecropping began. Oh, did it? Did it? Well, I don't think so, because when you look at the definition of sharecropping, meaning you lease land out, a landowner leases land out, and a share of the crops from those who've signed the lease, work the land, give a share of their crops to the landowner so that they can harvest their crops and sell them. They take all the risk, it was detrimental in the United States. It didn't last very long, sharecropping. It didn't go very far, and it was aimed exclusively and inclusively altogether at the African America freed from slavery, and throughout, just like apartheid would be segregation, that whole era, there was lots of sharecropping involved there, especially down in the South. But where did they get the idea, and what is sharecropping? Well, folks, I have every piece of written material from the former Soviet Union, Russia's Soviet Union, the USSR, and currently communist China, where sharecropping is the basis of communism, where the government owns all the land and everybody has to lease it. All agriculture, all residential, all industry, everybody leases the land upwards of 70 years. Sharecropping, a lease of 1 year you can renew. Now, you're not quite a slave, according to communism. You're not a slave, right? You're in charge of the production. You, the people, right? Does this sound like reality check? The government owns all the land. You, the people, lease from the government. You're in charge of the production. Well, that's the definition of sharecropping. That's sharecropping, which no longer exists, right? You should be able to buy your private property, use it in how you see fit. That's a free and just society. But where did sharecropping come from? So there used to be serfs and peasants on the lord and barons and kings' land from constitutional monarchies. They were slaves, just like what they talk about American slavery. All peasants and serfs worked on the master's land all throughout all of Europe. All the ancestors who migrated to Canada for the land releases was because they were coming here to become free. So they thought. But the government only released in Canada so much land in that respect, saying you won't be serfs and peasants anymore. There was a mass amount of land, 9% almost of Canada released. The rest, after treaties met and they locked away Indians on reserves, a very tiny, tiny percentage of Canada, 0.2% of Canada, and you will get a check every month. You will not be allowed to have any governance or government at all, no sovereignty. You will not be allowed to collect any taxes, and you will wait for the harvesters of the third-class Canadians whom we've released this land, and whatever they do with it, you'll get a percentage, like a sharecropper. Oh, so USA didn't invent it. Canada did. And then there's more for the third-class and second-class Canadians. Now, 90% of Canada is Crown land, provincial and federal. So all provinces have a good majority of Crown land. There's lots in Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan, and all through eastern Canada, all the way out to the Atlantic provinces. And you know what? They have provincial rules on Crown lands, and acts and bills passed. But the sharecropper has always been there. So if you're a hunter or an outdoor enthusiast and you try to access parks in Canada, in the wilderness through Crown land, you'll often come across barriers, like the Berlin Wall. You'll come across barriers like communism, where people who lease the Crown land from the government, who are in fact sharecroppers, have put up barriers, signs, roadblocks. And Canada tells you, hey, shh, don't worry, it's only the Berlin Wall.
Can you talk a little bit lower?
Sure. Yeah. So that is the reality. That is where it is. And that's real truth, history, and people share it. Get it out there. Get it out there. Let people know. They need to know. That's my video. God bless. Bye now.